Coming up on this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News, prohibitionists are starting to feed Congress and the public with negative research on cannabis studies, while federal reform looks bleak for cannabis in the 119th Congress. And Colorado Springs has issued a revote ballot question on adult use that already passed in November, but the city's council there won't accept that result, so Colorado Springs voters get a mulligan or a do-over with an April election. Plus, what impact will Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's resignation have on the existing cannabis market in that country? Debbie Facey has some insight from Ontario.
This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News, reporting from the backwaters of the Mississippi River, ice fishing for bull sharks.
The Chicago Clone Guy reports from a frozen Illinois lakeside, while his state continues to grapple with mislabeling of cannabis products. And was President Donald Trump tricked into supporting the Yes on 3 adult use initiative in Florida? One GOP senator in that state claims the language was confusing enough to start a new campaign for 2026. Plus, the race to become the 25th adult use legal state faces some pushback in Indiana, while Pennsylvania and Hawaii seem to be ready to move forward. All that, plus state reports from coast to coast on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, PCMTV's weekly roundup of the news from the cannabis industry. I'm Alaina Pinto. Here's your reminder to download our app, PCMTV, for free at the App Store or Google Play. You can keep up with the biggest stories from the cannabis industry every week, and that includes the new live stream on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern on 7 different social media platforms, simultaneously on YouTube, Meta, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, Rumble, Discord, and Cannabis X America. Our top story this week continues to review the impact of the new administration in Washington, D.C. Nomination hearings for members of President Trump's cabinet continued all week, with RFK Jr. getting grilled by senators who got confrontational at times, but surprisingly was never asked about federal reform of cannabis. What were his thoughts on that? We'll never know, as Congress decides on his future as the nominee to head the Department of Health and Human Services. A more ominous development comes out of the Banking and Finance Committee. That's where a GOP senator made it clear this week that safer banking for the cannabis industry is a non-starter for the 119th Congress. They've decided that they will only hear testimony from federally legal industries, pretty much dismissing any hope of reform for the next 2 years. Our man in Washington, D.C. is Andrew Behringer, and he has more on that.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. In what could be a pivotal moment for the cannabis industry, the Senate Banking Committee is set to hold a hearing this Wednesday on the controversial practice of debanking. However, industry insiders worry their voices may go unheard. Committee Chairman Tim Scott, a South Carolina Republican, has focused the hearing specifically on federal legal businesses effectively excluding the state legal cannabis industry that employs currently over 440,000 Americans. Now, the timing is particularly crucial as currently the control of Congress is shifted. Republicans now hold majority in both chambers, and despite former President Trump's campaign promises to support cannabis banking reform, significant hurdles still remain. The cannabis industry's banking struggles are very well documented. Even Bank of America, which recently stated it would never close accounts for political reasons, has faced current criticism from industry leaders. While the SAFE Banking Act, which would provide protections for financial institutions serving the cannabis industry, is expected to be reintroduced this session, its timing remains uncertain. The bill previously passed the House 7 times with bipartisan support, but has yet to receive a full Senate vote. For now, the industry watches and waits, hoping their stories of financial exclusion will resonate with lawmakers, even if they're not officially part of Wednesday's hearing. That's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There were no fewer than 4 different studies released this week on the impact of cannabis use on the brain, all concluding that using cannabis moderately or daily has a negative impact on your brain over time. Another one claims that cannabis can lead to heart failure. Yet in the same week, researchers on the impact of CBD or cannabidiol has very little negative impact on the brain or the heart. Most of the reporting by traditional media was on the study released by the University of Colorado's medical school, claiming that any use of cannabis impacts working memory or brain function during cognitive tasks. The use of MRIs in the study also concluded that this interaction with the brain's neurotransmitters can have long-lasting impact on users. It's likely anyone who has used cannabis or even had a drink of alcohol knows the impact on brain function. And in fact, one of the most common medical uses of cannabis is to relieve stress and anxiety. Altering one's consciousness is one of the desired effects of this plant. There are a number of studies that continue to look at experiences of regular users over a long period of time. It's another reason why we preach responsible consumption. And let's face it, we are in the middle of the largest uncontrolled clinical study of a drug in history, with 40 states decriminalizing it and 24 others legalizing adult use. It's interesting that this study comes out of Colorado, which was one of the 2 states to legalize it first in 2014. Perhaps a bigger concern in that state is what is going on in its second largest city, Colorado Springs. Voters there approved expanding the existing medical market to adult use with 54% of the vote in November, passing question 300. But since then, the city council has done nothing on moving towards implementing the adult use rules and regulations, and now they've announced the fall ballot question wasn't clear enough, so they will have a revote on this one issue in April. Citizens in that city are now suing the city council, claiming that this special revote is unconstitutional. PCMTV founder Jimmy Young talked one-on-one with the senior content producer of greenstate.com, Cara Wietstock, about the Colorado Springs situation this week.
They're going to have another vote. They're going to have a special vote now just for the adult use.
It was actually really disheartening the way the city council spoke. They literally called the voters confused about their voting for the ballot question because of the second initiative that the city council put on the ballot to make it confusing. And so many advocates of cannabis are concerned that they want to take this vote to April because there will not be as many voters turning out.
Right,
so they're hoping that it slides under and the voters that show up vote to repeal. So I think it's up to the activists in town to keep people informed.
That entire one-on-one special report is on our YouTube channel and on our PCMTV app. With more from Colorado, here's Xavier Jaillet.
I'm Xavier Jaillet, chairman of the Colorado chapter of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce and a non-attorney professional with the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And here's what's going on in Colorado this week. I've got 2 stories to share with everyone today, and the first is related to the adult use sales initiative passed in Colorado Springs in November's vote of last year. As some of the listeners will know, adult use sales were approved by a majority of voters in Colorado Springs. Now, unfortunately, the city council in Colorado Springs has issued a notice of a second vote, attempting to repeal the voters' desires initially found in the November vote approving adult use sales. This vote will occur on April 1st in a special election, and city council members claim that the language of the ballot may have confused voters and that they don't believe that voters truly knew that they were voting to legalize cannabis in Colorado Springs. So come April 1st, we'll have another vote regarding the future of adult use recreational sales in Colorado Springs. Now, the second story is related to a yeast and mold recall issued in conjunction with the Colorado Department of Revenue and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. This recall is related to yeast and mold levels found in unacceptable amounts in recreational adult use flower products sold by Med Farms Holdings LLC, which does business as Bud and Mary's here in Colorado. Now, these products were sold between February 7th and December 20th of 2024, and the firm has indicated a willingness and a voluntariness to work with authorities to ensure that consumers are protected, properly notified of the recall, and given attempts at recourse to return those products and exchange them for compliant products in the future. That's the Colorado Cannabis News Report this week. I'm Xavier Jaillet reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Next up, another state with challenges is Oregon. Sure enough, there was another dispensary that closed in that state this week called the Portland Cannabis Market. And actually, that store was called the Costco of cannabis. Marianne Cursetjee has some details on what happened to PCM.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with the Oregon Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Another cannabis licensee has gone out of business. Portland Cannabis Market, PCM, was robbed again, and this proved too much for the business to endure. PCM was designed to be a wholesale shopping location where they would stock mostly bulk pounds, and then retailers would come in and buy for their dispensaries. They have suffered a number of robberies over the years, blamed on poor support from local law enforcement. Next, attorney Vince Slawowski writes an annual forecast for the Oregon cannabis industry. His forecast is that cannabis will not be a legislative priority this year, and that any bills to pass would likely be only scaffolding and maintenance. And finally, retailers and processors are working through the implications of Ballot Measure 119, which passed last November. This measure requires a labor peace agreement with a union before the state cannabis license can be renewed. This is proving to be challenging as it applies to all of these licensees regardless of size. So a single owner licensee without any employees is still required to sign an LPA with a union. Also, there have been reports of predatory organizations charging for this service, once again taking advantage of cannabis businesses. That's the Oregon Cannabis Report. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now we can give you an update on the race to become the 25th adult use state in the U.S., equaling half of the total in this country. Pennsylvania, once again, is starting to move in that direction. This time, the budget crisis might serve as the impetus to get adult use over the finish line. The state's budget gap is $3.7 billion, and there are a few options to close that gap without moving towards adult use legalization. This week, that state's Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro, will be calling for this in his annual State of the State address in the Keystone State. One of the facts to move forward with this is that 60% of people from Pennsylvania are doing their cannabis shopping in the border states of New Jersey, Ohio, and Maryland. Pennsylvania has tried before, but now advocates are hoping the mood has changed in their legislature. Not such good news in Indiana, where a Republican-led Congress in that state has now blocked the reform amendment that was introduced a few weeks ago. That measure sought to declassify cannabis as a federally illegal Schedule I drug, but was soundly defeated by that state's GOP leaders. Indiana is surrounded by legal adult use states, so many lawmakers are looking to keep those revenues in their own state. No such issues in Arizona, but plenty more items are up for debate in that state's legislature. Here's Karen Black with our Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The 57th session of the Arizona legislature includes several cannabis-related measures. I reported on two last week, a House bill that would restrict cannabis advertising and a Senate bill to release funds for cannabis research. Here's the rundown on four others. To close a loophole stemming from the state's definition of schools, a Senate bill would restrict medical dispensaries and cultivation sites from being within 500 feet of preschools and childcare facilities. Two House bills are aimed at veterans. One appropriates $10 million to the health department to issue and renew medical cards for former service members, and the other would give honorably discharged veterans financial relief on medical cards. An interesting House concurrent resolution would prohibit the establishment of cannabis dispensaries and testing labs on unincorporated land surrounded on all sides by Indian reservations. If passed by both chambers, the issue will go to the public for a vote. Speaking of legislation, the Arizona chapter of NORML is holding its annual lobby days February 3rd through 6th in Phoenix. Check out their Facebook page if you're interested in volunteering. Meanwhile, in Tucson, NORML is participating in a local highway cleanup effort February 1st. In other legal news, Janet Jackham has joined Phoenix law firm Fenimore as a director in its business and finance practice group. Ms. Jackham is on the board of directors of the Arizona Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, the legal committee of NORML, and is the secretary of the Arizona Cannabis Bar Association. And finally, there were 3 cannabis events in Phoenix this past week: Canna Friends, Mita, and Maggie Jane's Mocktail Hour. Good times. That's all for this week's Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
One more state that is looking for the right time to enact adult use and sale of cannabis is Hawaii. This week, Hawaii lawmakers and state officials held open hearings on the potential for a legalized cannabis market in that state. Interestingly, not only would this new bill regulate the cannabis industry, but would also put hemp-derived products under the same regulatory body. The goal is to open the market in January of 2026, where adults could grow at home, plus possess 1 ounce of cannabis and 5 milligrams of concentrate. If Hawaii passes this bill, they would be the first state to have a single regulatory board to oversee both the hemp and THC cannabis industries. There was some progress in New York State this week as their governor, Kathy Hochul, signed a bill that would reopen cannabis farmers markets. Details on that and more with Pam Chmiel. Our New York State Cannabis Report is now.
This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Pam Chmiel reporting from New York. New York Governor Kathy Hochul has signed a bill to revive the previously discontinued farmers markets. However, details on the applications have yet to be released. Hopefully, the Office of Cannabis Management can get everything in place before summer as farmers are eager to gear up for the season. And in other news, the well-known California brand Stisley is officially entering the New York market on September 7th. Already a dominant force in 7 states, Stisley's products have flooded New York's illegal markets for the past few years. Last summer, Stisley was sued in California for allegedly marketing dangerous high-potency vapes to youth. It's unclear how a product with so many accusations of unethical business practices would get approved for a brand license by the New York State Office of Cannabis Management. And it will be interesting to see if Stisley's presence in the New York legal market leads to the sudden disappearance of their products from storefronts that are illegal. And meanwhile, cannabis beverages continue to surge in popularity across the country, with hemp-derived drinks making their way into wine, beer, and liquor stores. In New York, 6 marijuana-infused beverage brands are competing for the market. According to Headset data, the Heirloom brand is leading by a significant margin. They raked in $5 million in sales in the last half of 2024. and the remaining 5 beverage brands are lagging far behind, with sales only hovering around $100,000 during the same time period. Heirloom started with a significant brand awareness and is well known for its 100-year-old apple farm, before switching to making marijuana-infused apple cider. And finally, New York Fashion Week is about to heat up, and New York cannabis brands are making an appearance on the runway. Newcomer Pink and LGBTQ brand Flamer are among the local cannabis brands participating in the festivities. We'll have more updates on the show next week. For now, this is Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Pam Chmiel reporting from New York.
That'll do it for the A block, or first section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. But coming up, we will head out to the Midwest to hear from the Chicago clone guy, Mark Allen, who reports from one of the many frozen lakes in Illinois. We'll be right back.
Ice fishing for bull sharks. While I'm sitting on a bucket in the rain. It's kind of nasty out here, but we got some good ice. Today.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.